It was early spring a few years ago, when I was at my wit's end because I had not received a job offer by the end of March. I was at a loss for a job offer when I received a call from an advertising agency that had rejected me after I had reached the final interview stage. "It's kind of sudden, but we have an opening for new graduates, so can you come on April 1st? I had not yet found a job, so I agreed to the offer and decided to start working as a new member of society in April. However, it takes more than 2 hours from my current place of residence to my workplace. I tried to find a place to rent in the vicinity of my workplace, and checked out several major real estate agencies. However, since it was already right after the moving season, the best properties were already occupied, and the search for a place was difficult. At that time, I saw a sign for a cheap rental apartment in front of a station near my workplace. I was reluctant to move, but I thought I could move again after my new life became stable, so I decided to contact the real estate agency on the sign. As I expected, there were not many good properties available at this time of the year. Although the building was a little old, I was introduced to a fairly inexpensive apartment with a large private area for the market price in this neighborhood. I was told that I could not see the interior of the house because it was currently undergoing house cleaning. However, I could not afford to spend any more time looking for a property, and decided to sign the contract because the exterior was old but had a good taste. There are only 5 days left until the first day of work. We hurried to move out of our current house and move in, and managed to move into our new house on March 31st, 1 day before the first day of work. On the evening of March 31st, the price was quite cheap at the market price in this area, no matter how old the house was. We arrived at the new house, worried that the inside would be very shabby. The interior was surprisingly clean, and the repeatedly painted concrete walls and flooring that had been polished over time were rather tasteful. I felt that I could live here for a long time. Since we moved just before the start of work, our household goods were to arrive the following weekend, and we decided to sleep in an empty room with the sleeping bag we had brought with us that day. The next day was the first day of work, so I decided to go to bed right away to recover from the week's hectic preparations. That night I woke up with terrible ringing in my ears and trouble sleeping. I was in Kinbaku and could not move my body. However, since I often suffer from Kinbaku when I am extremely tired, I was not surprised and stared blankly at the pitch-dark, empty room. Gradually, my eyes became accustomed to the darkness, and I could see the walls and floor of the room clearly. Just out of my rigid gaze, I saw a closet with a sliding door, and I noticed that the sliding door was slightly ajar. I just stared at the gap in the sliding door. Then I noticed that the sliding door seemed to open slowly and subtly. I stared at it, thinking it was an optical illusion, but the sliding door still seemed to open slightly. The darkness behind the sliding door seemed to be so deep that it seemed to go on forever, and I felt fear. I was asleep on the floor, but my gaze remained fixed on the lower part of the darkness of the slightly open closet. At the edge of my gaze, I saw what appeared to be a faint white blur stirring in the darkness at the top of the closet's sliding door. His ears began to ring more and more strongly, and he could feel cold sweat running down his face. Finally, just as my fear was approaching its extreme limit, my fingertips twitched convulsively. The bonds had been broken. I hurriedly unzipped my sleeping bag, stood up, and pressed the light switch. But the light did not turn on. Half panicking, I pressed the switch again and again, but there was no response. I opened the door to my room as it was and went out into the hallway. The hallway light was on, and I managed to regain my composure. I left my door open and pressed the light switch on the front door so that the hallway light would come on, but there was still no response. It seemed that my room was the only one without power. My next thought was to call the power company, but I realized that I had left my cell phone in the room. My wallet was also in my room, which meant I couldn't spend any time outside. I fastened my shoes under the front door, left the door open, and dashed toward my bag in my room by the light in the hallway. When I reached the bag, I slung it over my shoulder and dashed for the front door without looking anywhere else. At that moment, the door began to close as my shoes were dragged by the weight of the door. I felt as if I would never be able to leave this room once the door closed. When I reached the front door, I hurriedly held it shut and ran out. That day I decided to take shelter until morning in a comic book shop in front of the station. This woke me up completely and, unable to sleep, I passed the time by reading manga until morning. In the morning, the town became noisier and I was able to relax, and I smiled as I recalled my behavior last night and realized that I was more jumpy than I had thought. It wasn't like I saw something clearly, and I couldn't believe that I would freak out over a closet that happened to be slightly open and a power outage. When I arrived home, I checked the breaker. The breaker was up. No big deal, I had slept with the air conditioner on, so I figured it could happen. The closet was indeed half open, but I opened it to check and found no problem. I immediately showered and dressed and headed to work. I changed my mind, thinking that what I should be worrying about now was not the closet in my new house, but the workplace. Although I scoffed at myself for my behavior, from that day onward, when I came home at night, I left the front door open and checked to see if the lights were on. I began to sleep with the closet tightly closed, duct taped from the outside, and with the lights on, even hiding my face in a sleeping bag. I guess I was afraid of what I had experienced that day. The household goods were to be delivered over the weekend, but I had to work on short notice and asked her to bring them in. While I was at work, she called me and said, "Why are you blocking the closet with duct tape?" "I don't get it, can I open it?" she asked. I gave a reasonable reason that there were cockroaches in the closet on the first day. When I left work at night, she called me again. Her voice on the phone sounded excited, a far cry from the calm she had sounded during the day. "I'm not staying at your place today. Hey, that thing in your closet, did something happen to you?" she asked me again. "So the cockroaches," he explains. But she would not listen to me. She wouldn't listen to me. I asked her, "What's wrong?" I asked her, and she said that while she was taking a shower, she saw someone behind the glass in the shower room. I asked her, "What's going on?" I got a chill. It was just your imagination, right? But she wouldn't listen to me, saying that a shadow passed by repeatedly. Finally, she became angry, saying things like, "You called me here because you knew there was a ghost, didn't you?" I said, "If you say that to me, I'm going home today." I said, "If you say that, I can't go home today. You've got to be kidding me." I argued with him, but he hung up on me. When I arrived home that day, I found the household goods neatly arranged and dinner carefully wrapped and placed on the table. I felt bad for her and tried to call her to apologize, but I couldn't get through. When the lights and TV were on, the room was not very scary. I don't feel any stares or discomfort as I have seen in horror stories. However, as expected, I did not feel like taking a shower when I heard such a story. After eating and watching TV while getting into bed, I fell asleep before I knew it because I was so tired from my first week on the job. That night, I was awakened again by ringing in my ears. Moreover, the light that should have been on was off. My eyes were still fixed on the closet. I see the duct tape hanging from the closet. She was so careless that she forgot to remove the tape, and forgot to stop it. Fear, not being able to close her eyes. Gradually her eyes become accustomed to the darkness. And slowly, the sliding closet door is opened. This time, I'm on the bed, so my fixed gaze is high. I can clearly see the top of the closet. The sliding door opens very slowly. It was no longer an illusion. It was certainly closed at first. I vaguely see a white object through the opening of the closet. It is something hanging on the sliding door from the inside of the closet. A finger, it is certainly a human finger. 4 fingers, only the first joints of the tips of the fingers are visible, are hanging on the sliding door and slowly opening it. I was afraid to speak, but I couldn't. I was scared to the point of insanity. I was terrified to the point of insanity. When the door opened about 25 centimeters, I began to see something pitch black. It was a human head, a hair. It seemed to be lying on its side on the top shelf of the closet. When I finally saw the forehead of the it, I had one fear: I must not make eye contact with this thing. As soon as I felt that, my fingers twitched, and the bonds were broken. I immediately pulled the covers over my head. The lights would probably not come on again. I felt this intuitively and curled up under the covers, shivering. I wondered how much time had passed and desperately waited for morning under the covers. But after a while, the mattress of my bed sank in. There is someone else on this bed besides me. Please. Please go away. I desperately thought, and then I felt the futon being pulled down. I could see her white toes and hair through the cracks in the covers. I finally reached the pinnacle of my fear and went crazy. I pulled back the covers as hard as I could. I'll kill you. I got out of bed with the covers on and ran screaming to the front door. On the way, he tripped and fell on the ottoman of the sofa and threw the futon behind him. I threw the futon behind me, kicked over the table, and without looking back, opened the door and ran out into the hallway. I was so panicked, I didn't know what to do. In the hallway, the lights were flashing and a woman's announcement echoed through the hallway, creating an eerie situation. Confused and unable to swallow the situation, he heads for the elevator, but there is no response when he presses the button. The woman's announcement came from the other side of the elevator door. The woman's announcement sounded something like, "The elevator is out of order, please use the elevator handset to contact maintenance." The announcement sounds something like this: when I tried to head for the stairs without knowing what was going on. The elevator doors opened with a terrible noise, but I ran down the stairs without looking back. When I stepped outside, I was relieved to see the street lights on and cars driving by. I went outside barefoot, but I didn't care about that anymore. I didn't dare go back to get my wallet or cell phone. I didn't dare to go back to the park to get my wallet or cell phone, but I knew that even if I asked a stranger for help, he or she would doubt my train of thought. So I waited for morning on a bench in a nearby park, barefoot. In the morning, I gradually remembered it and became angry. Even if there was a spirit, it was a joke to scare people. Even if he was in trouble and wanted to contact me or my girlfriend, how could he do it that way? I was like, what's wrong with that? People in town looked at me with disdain, barefoot and in light clothing, and I was getting angrier and angrier. When I returned to my apartment and opened the door to my room, I pounded the wall with my fist. Are you still there? If you ever interrupt me again, I swear I'll never forgive you. I then packed the bare necessities and went to an internet cafe. I spent the next week in the internet cafe, looked for a new place to live, arranged to move out, and moved in. I still can't sleep alone with the lights off after moving, perhaps because the horror of that day is still etched in my mind. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.